Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. My name's Rebecca. I'm here today to talk you through about how the LCD3, which is a dashboard control for e-bikes, how it works, what you can adjust, what we would advise you don't adjust, and what everything means, some of the common features that you might want to play with on that display. So here we have the LCD3. It has the functions of a battery gauge, the amount of time that the bike has been running since you've reset the trip meter, the assist, which relates to the pedelec, so how strong the level of assistance is, which will engage the motor from your pedaling. It's got your speedo, the wattage of the motor, the distance that's been travelled again since you reset the trip meter, so these both can clear. We'll show you that in a moment. And you've got the ambient temperature here. So there are some other screens that can be engaged by this button. This next screen shows you the average speed, and the other things are still the same. This screen tells you the maximum speed. It also tells you the voltage of the battery at the present time. So this battery being at 47.7 volts means it's actually a bit low, hence only 1 bar on the battery gauge. One of the functions that we like to do with the LCD is to clear the trip meter. So the important thing is to wait 10 seconds after turning it on to do that. In a moment I'll tell you the settings that are reached if you do that within 10 seconds. So we want to make sure that to clear this data here on the trip meter, you actually turn it on, wait 10 seconds. Then we press and hold the up and down button together at the same time for a couple of seconds. Those figures start flashing and we can press the middle button to clear that trip data. You'll see if we scroll to the next screen, that odometer and the total time are still showing. So that's the overall since the controller was installed. One more click shows our voltage readings, and then back to the normal screen, ready to start a new trip. So now I'll show you what happens if you press and hold the up and down buttons before waiting 10 seconds. So we turn the system on. We press the up and down buttons straight away and we see a number 72 usually flashing. This relates to the top speed of the motor. This motor here will never achieve that anyway, so it's a little superfluous, unless of course you would like to limit your maximum top speed, which you can do by pressing the down arrows. So we might just set that to 60 just to make sure we're within the speed limits. Press the middle button and you see the wheel size down here start flashing. So in some cases you may find your speedo might be out because the wheel size set in here is wrong. So this one is set to 26 inch. If you have a larger wheel, a 700C can be set in here, 28 inch, 29 inch, etc. Back down to the bottom, 6 inch, 8, 10. So you can choose your wheel size so that the speedo is going to be the most accurate it can. You press the middle button again and you'll see the kilometres per hour start flashing. If we press the down button, it'll actually change that to miles per hour. So here in Australia we're not going to do that, but in other places you may want to. Now if we press and hold the up and down again, we get into what's called the P settings. I'm going to show you some figures up on the screen here which relate to the different P1 settings and what they actually mean. This one essentially relates to the number of motor magnets inside the motor, so that will be specific according to the motor that you have on board. P2 relates to the type of speed sensor that you have fitted to the bike. So 0 relates to the rim type, 1 relates to the internal type. There are a number of other options. Those are the standard ones for our kits. and normally this would be set to 1 on our kits. So P3 relates to the type of pedelec sensor. Again, standard is number 1 on our kits. P4 set to 0, that relates to the start mode of the motor. So when it's set to 0, the throttle will start the motor or the pedelec. If it's set just to 1, the throttle won't start the motor. P5 relates to the voltage. So 15 flashing means we've got a 48 volt battery. If you had a 36 volt battery, P5 should be set to 12. Okay, so then when that one stops flashing, you can get into the next level of menu by pressing again and holding the up and down buttons at the same time. You'll then find that you're in the C settings. So this is another level of complexity. You can imagine if you get into these settings when you're intending just to reset your trip meter, that you may actually do a few things you weren't intending to that are not necessarily going to be so great for your bike's performance. C1 relates to the sensitivity of the pedelec. So set to 2 is the lowest sensitivity. You may be able to set it to 0 for standard. There's some other pedelecs that we use which can be used with this controller, so long as C1 is set to 6 or 7. So this is something we adjust if we're using a non-standard type of pedelec sensor. C2 relates to the motor phase classification. So default is 0. C3 is the power assist ratio gear initialization mode, which is set to 8 as standard on our kits. C4 relates to handlebar function setting mode, 0 on our kits. C5 relates to the maximum current adjustment. So if you would like to adjust the maximum current on your motor, we can actually adjust that slightly. Not in a big way because it's still dependent on what your controller can deliver, but we can be adjusting the current by actually upping. Actually, it's on maximum, this one. So we can actually go down, meaning that there'll be a 15% reduction in the current flow to the motor. So that might be a way to conserve some battery power when you're out on a road. C6 relates to the backlight brightness. So we've got the backlight which comes on this screen. If we want to adjust that, we can. C7 is cruise control. So if you have a cruise control function, you would set that to 1. C8 is the motor temperature display mode. So if you have a temperature sensor in the motor, you would have that set to 1. C9 is setting up a password. So if you wanted to set a password up on your system, we can do that in this setting. So we change that to 1. And then we see up here some numbers flashing. These numbers relate to the password we can set for the system when we start it up. So we're just going to leave that at 555 for now and keep moving through. Okay, C11 relates to the attribute selection mode. So that depends on which type of display you actually want to be compatible with which type of controller. So for us it's 0 as standard. C12 relates to the low voltage cutout. This is an important one. The standard setting is usually 4. If we want to protect our battery from discharging to the point that can actually damage the cells at some point, we can change that figure to be 5, which will mean that the battery will cut out half a volt higher than the regular setting. So rather than emptying all the way down to the point where cells are getting a little bit damaged each time. If you raise that low voltage cutout just by 0.5 volt, any more you might be dramatically reducing your range. You will reduce your range somewhat by reducing it even by 0.5 of a volt, but that's a pretty good safety feature to protect your battery and potentially as much as double the lifespan of your battery pack. C13 relates to the strength of the regen braking. So if you have regen braking on board, you may want to adjust this setting. It's on 0 now. In fact, this motor does have regen, so I'll adjust this up. Number 1 is actually the most regen you can have, and number 5 being the least. So we might put it at about number 4 and see how the bike performs. And C14 relates to the pedelec tuning, so how strong the responsiveness of the pedelec is. 2 is standard, so we'll just leave it there at this stage. And then we're back to the start. So we can press and hold the middle button to get back to our main screen. Alright, thanks for watching. I hope you found that useful. Feel free to contact us if you have any questions or need further information on anything to do with the LCD3 or our kits. And for now, rev on everyone.
Nice.